What is going on, you beautiful people of the world, as I sit here hating myself to the greatest degree possible? I want to talk more about Pokemon, and it's not going to be specifically about Pokemon, it's going to be a bit more broad than that, and just kind of more in regard to developers in general, and the massive disparity between, like, the bigger companies and the indie companies, and how they treat their product. And how they have to treat their product to be successful. But before I get into that, I want to tell you why I hate myself. This is largely in part because I started playing Pokemon Let's Go again. I'd kind of given it up for a while. It wasn't really my jam for a little bit. But I picked it up again. I got sucked back into it. But now I'm looking at it more critically. Pokemon is a series for me that, because it is a part of my childhood, I turn a sort of blind eye to a lot of its faults. Not all of them. I'd certainly have my complaints about other games in the series, but I've still never skipped at least one version of a generation. I've bought into every single generation, at least one of the games, regardless of what I thought about them. And so now that all this drama is going around about Pokemon Sword and Shield, about how Game Freak seems to be, like, kind of making Pokemon a secondary priority and kind of just coasting along and not really pushing to, like, improve it and make it better and make it what it should be, I've been, like I said, I've been a bit more critical about the game, about what I'm playing. So anyway, what I'm doing right now and why I hate myself is that I decided I wanted a shiny Beedrill. But I decided that since I'm going to spend the time to get a shiny Beedrill, I may as well go ahead and get the, oh god, what's his name? Weedle. I almost called it Weevil. Get the Weedle Master, the Kakuna Master, and the Beedrill Master titles at the same time. So I'm currently in the middle of mashing A in the Kakuna battle, because you can't teach any of these Pokemon TMs. Only Beedrill can learn TMs. Weedle and Kakuna cannot. So you can't teach them any new moves. The only attack move they know is Poison Sting, which obviously that's a poison move against a poison type. Not a lot of damage. And there are not enough Poison Stings to be able to kill the opposing Kakuna. So I am stuck here, mashing A, trying to deplete all of my PP, and so I can get Struggle and hopefully kill this guy. So, really fun fight, well thought out on their end. So that's why I hate myself. So let's talk about Pokemon, because as I'm playing it, I am starting to cast a more critical eye. Now, one of the things that actually became a meme in Pokemon Sun and Moon about how the main character would just, like, have this blank expression all the time. It was not a good look at all. And so I started looking at that too in this game, and it really surprises me that it's the exact same case here, where the main character just has a blank expression. It's just nothingness. It's a void on their face, and it's so strange because the Eevee, Let's Go Eevee, has so much character. It interacts with the world. It's interested in the world. It develops a character that you can be like, oh, like, obviously, it's pretty much all there. It exists to be like, oh my god, that's so adorable, right? And it is. It really is. And it makes you care about this Eevee, right? Because it's a character that, like, you know, it's engaging with the world. It's engaging kind of with you to a degree. But the main character? Nothing. No interest whatsoever in the world, never does anything, never shows anything, just may as well not exist. We could just be floating around in nothingness and just watching an Eevee go on a Pokemon adventure by itself, and we'd have the same connection with this nothingness that we have with the main character. It's a bad look. And, like, this is the Pokemon Company. They make so much money, it would make everybody's head spin. Like, this is the kind of thing that even, like, CEOs of other companies look at and are jealous of, the amount of money that they make. It's ridiculous. And yet, their games are kind of, what's the word that I want to use? Second rate. There's no investment in it. You don't see the product of how successful this company is in the actual game, in the graphics, in the story development and all that stuff. You don't see it at all. It's nowhere near as advanced as it should be. And I think about like the first time I played Super Mario Odyssey and just how crisp the game looked and how beautiful it looked inside of its engine and how I just really enjoyed looking around the world. I've never really felt that in Pokemon. There's certain parts where it's kind of like, hey, that looks cool, that's neat. But I've never once thought like, holy shit, this environment looks amazing. Oh my god, this level design is incredible. Not once. And as I started to cast a more critical eye on the game itself, I started to see that there were a lot of things that looked bad. Models that were jagged. You could see pixelation on, like, when you're in battle, and it would kind of zoom in on the Pokemon. You could see pixelation on the models underneath them of the environment. Where it's just, there's no excuse for that. With how big of a product Pokemon is, with how big this should be. There's no excuse for it to be looking like this, but it does. And so that really got me thinking of like, if you put this in the hands of an indie developer, if you put, let's say, if the Pokemon series in general got a developer behind it who was as passionate about this product as the people behind Shovel Knight are in their game. Think of that. How Shovel Knight is honestly like a premier platformer. If somebody came to me and asked me, I really want to play a 2D platformer, what should I pick? I would be hard pressed to pick something other than Shovel Knight because it's just that damn good in every regard. Every expansion they've come out with has felt like a different game, but it's been just as solid, it's been just as finely tuned. The level design is damn near perfect. It's as close to a perfect platformer as I can pick out, personally. Now, there are other examples as well, like, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Metroid Prime, the old ones, stuff like that. Like, those would be good examples too, but Shovel Knight is the most current example, and the developers are still continuing to expand the game, still working on it, still making it just one of the best games that's been released in recent memory. What if you got a group of people that was as impassioned toward Pokemon and expanding its world and making it the perfect example of the genre as Yacht Club Games is about Shovel Knight? Or about, what's another example? The Capcom team that made Monster Hunter Generations. Monster Hunter Generations is the one that came out on the Switch, right? And that was really good, but I was thinking of Monster Hunter World. Regardless, absolutely beautiful game. Nobody can look at that and be like, God damn, this is ugly. Right? Like, it's gorgeous. I was blown away initially. Everything that was going on, like even the cinematics, the levels, the fights, all of it was just, the graphics blew my mind. It's such a good looking game. All the weapon, everything. Just I don't want to gush too much. But my point being is that you have these developers who clearly care about their product, who clearly want to give the best example, to do their best, to create the best game they possibly can. Say best again. best. And it shows. It really shows. And that's the most successful Monster Hunter game of all time, as far as I'm aware. Like, it blew up. And originally, for a very long time, Monster Hunter was it was kind of sort of successful outside of Japan. It was huge in Japan. It's always been huge there. But it never met the same degree of success outside of Japan. In comes Monster Hunter World, kicks down the door, says, what's up, I'm here to stay, this is my place now, and everybody was fine with it. They were like, yeah, you deserve the spot here. We're in for the long haul, thank you. Please stay, we're down with it. And it's, again, if the same degree of effort, of passion, went into making a Pokemon game as went into that game, god damn! And then you have examples on all other ends of the spectrum as well, right? Like Star Wars Battlefront. People were very excited about that, rightfully so. We're still waiting for a recent Star Wars game to pop off like some of the old ones did. Hasn't happened. Star Wars Battlefront had, I think it's hard to argue that it's not EA's fault that went through the shitter as hard as it did, but regardless, it was a massive failure. And yet despite, I shouldn't say that. From a public perception, it was a massive failure. And yet despite that, it still sold, like 4 or 5 million copies? Something like that. I'm pretty sure they likely still made a profit off of it, a very comfortable profit off of it, despite it being such an objectively bad game from a lot of perspectives. And that's a bad look. That despite everything that was wrong with it, despite it being a damn near, blueprint for everything that's wrong with current generation gaming, it still sold millions of copies. People still bought it. And that's the issue, is that these companies that are just coasting along on the name of their product are being allowed to do so. And I'm not trying to guilt anybody. If you did buy Star Wars Battlefront, I am absolutely guilting you for that. You should never have given money to that, ever. It didn't deserve it. You shouldn't have did that. You fucked up. In regard to Pokemon, it's not that serious. It is, I do believe that they are coasting quite hard, that they clearly don't have the passion to push the game to make it something that fans want it to be. But on the flip side of that, there's also the issue that a huge amount of the fans of the game have grown up. This is a series for kids. It's always been a series for kids. Unless something absolutely radical happens, it will always be a series for kids. So despite a lot of people that are clamoring for a more mature experience, for a more expansive world, those things don't really go well for younger kids, right? Because they'll get lost. I shouldn't say that. Breath of the Wild, I don't know exactly how open Breath of the Wild was. I need to play that so I can actually include it in discussions. But that was a massively successful game. I have to imagine it was successful with younger kids as well. So I doubt that that's really a valid excuse. I'm just kind of thinking that it would be really easy to get lost for a child. Whereas when you have a more or less linear, it's not necessarily linear, but by and large it kind of is. You're walking, you don't have a massive open world where you have to open up a map to understand where you are and to potentially mark where you're going. You more or less understand where you are at any given point in time, and you really only have like 2 or 3 places that you could go. It's not a massive open world that you can get lost in. But it's still an open-ish world. I don't know how to properly explain that. But so that was one reason that I think that's not going to happen. We're definitely not going to be seeing a mature story anytime soon, the way that people want. Like, I still remember, I even talked about this on stream recently. There are these comics called Pokemon Adventure. And I haven't read them all. But I got the very first one as a kid. And I can still distinctly remember the page where, was it an Arbok that got cut in half? I can't remember if it was an Arbok that got cut in half or if an Arbok cut something in half. I can't remember, but I still distinctly remember that in my mind. It was not the far end of the spectrum in regard to violence and, like kind of the more mature aspects of a game that people wish for, but it got close. And seeing a story like that would be kind of sick. There was this webcomic that I can't remember what it was called, and I don't know if it continued, but it would be sick if it did, of somebody who actually was doing a mature Pokemon story. And so it started out with like these police going in. I don't know if it was specifically Team Rocket or if it was something different, but it showed these police that were going in and breaking into a building, and they had like Arcanines with bullet vests on them. They were using Voltorbs as like breaching explosives, that kind of thing. It was just really sick to see. The artwork was amazing. And so something like that would be absolutely amazing to see. Something along those lines of a grimmer, I don't want to say necessarily a dark story. I don't think Pokemon should exist where it's actually dark, but a more mature storyline where Pokemon are actually utilized the way you would think they would be utilized in real day-to-day life. We still haven't seen that. That was something that was touted quite often in both Sun and Moon and Let's Go, where it's like, now you can actually see Pokemon on the overworld doing things, interacting with the world, and that was bullshit. They're always just standing there doing nothing, not being useful in any way whatsoever. And so actually having a world where Pokemon exist within it and serve a purpose beyond just a collectathon would be really, really cool. And the technology is there now. The Switch can do that. We saw that with Breath of the Wild. The Switch is capable of handling that. But the Pokemon Company, or not, I shouldn't say that, Game Freak clearly doesn't care enough about the product to push it to that level. And I think that's been shown. Let me actually check this out real quick. Let me see. I want to see how much Pokemon Sun and Moon sold. Because as far as I'm aware, the games have been kind of sort of not there's no sharp decline whatsoever. Let me search for something different here. Pokemon sales by generation. Hit me. Okay, let's see. Goddamn. So Sun and Moon actually saw an increase over X and Y, which isn't surprising, because I think X and Y, like Diamond and Pearl, is where you see a huge drop-off. I should double-check this to make sure that there's actually corroboration between the figures of other things. So let's see, 29 million there. This one says 42.2 million? Or is this only... There's a bit of a disparity between these two. It did feel kind of big. Like this one is listing red, green, blue, and yellow at 60 million. And here it's only listed as 46. But could that only be in the Oh, this includes... I see. This includes the sales from the remakes as well. And the 3DS re-releases. Okay, that makes sense. So these are probably accurate, I would say. Because let me actually go check. Heart Gold, Soul Silver sold 22 million. Yeah, that would add up. Okay, so yeah, these look accurate. So I'm going to stick with these. So, Generation 1. This includes Fire Red, Leaf Green, and the re-releases of the games on the Virtual Console for the 3DS. 60 million in sales. That's obscene. Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal also includes Heart Gold and Soul Silver. 42 million. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, 36.6 million. Oh, actually, that fucks it up, though, looking at it. Because that means... Because when you're looking at this, right, the re-releases for Omega Ruby, or not the re-releases, the release of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire sold 14 million copies. So originally, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald only sold around 22.5 million. But Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum sold 25.2 million. So, Gen 3 actually sold less than Gen 4 until Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire came around and buffed those numbers up, technically. And then Black and White sold a smidgen less, a million less than Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. But then X and Y came out. Okay, so there hasn't really been a decline, to be honest. Not really. I mean, from Generation 1, yeah. Generation 1 had nearly 46 million copies sold. That's excluding Fire Red, Leaf Green, and the Virtual Console re-releases. And then Gen 2, without the re-releases, sold around 30 million. So that's a pretty significant drop-off there. But other than that, each generation sold kind of more or less around the 22 to 25 million range until X and Y only sold 16.3. But that's also the first generation where there wasn't another game released afterwards. So yeah, the sales figures really haven't differed much at all since Gen 3. They've all hovered around the 16 million range-ish for the first game. And then X and Y is so low because there was never a second release. Like, if there had been a Pokemon Z released, like what everybody was thinking was going to happen, then those sales figures for that generation probably would have been around the same as all the other generations around it. So even though it looks like it sold far less, it really didn't. It pretty much stuck with the norm. So they really haven't changed at all. There hasn't really been much of a decline. It looks like it if you only look at the sales figures, but then you kind of think about it a teensy bit deeper. And there really hasn't been any difference. The only reason why it seems like Pokemon X and Y is an outlier is because there was never a follow-up. Whereas, obviously, all the preceding generations, besides Black and White, had the third edition, which was kind of like a mixture of the two, and then also some additional story elements. And then Black and White had Black and White 2 that came out afterwards. That was largely released, I think, because of the backlash of Black and White and how difficult it was to have, and like how it just didn't feel good to only have that generation-specific Pokemon until the story was completely over. Because I distinctly remember playing Black 2 and instantly being like, they are giving us way too many damn Pokemon right now. You finish the first route and you already have like 15 possible Pokemon that you can pick from. It just felt absolutely overwhelming, the amount of Pokemon they just threw at you. And that was clearly an answer to the criticisms of Black and White for it just feeling like there weren't how much it just didn't feel good to only have that generation-specific Pokemon available until the story was over. Okay, so that point is clearly out the window. There really hasn't been any decline in sales. They've pretty much stayed largely the same in around the 16 million area for the first initial games. Let's Go did only reach 10 million apparently. I mean, it seems like there's probably that should be updated and looked at because that's too clean. For like all these other ones are like, here's 16.22 million copies sold. Here's 15.64, and then Pokemon Let's Go, 10 million exactly on the dot. It's a bit too clean, so those probably may not be completely accurate. And I assume there's likely some updating needing to be done, but it would also make sense that it would sell less because of the massive difference in gameplay, where you're no longer fighting wild Pokemon to catch them. You have the motion controls, which I personally hate, and I also find them a little bit too finicky. They're not accurate enough. It's really difficult to deal with. Like, if you're not throwing just straight ahead, if a Pokemon hops to the left or to the right, it can become kind of tricky and weird to make sure you're throwing it accurately to the side so you hit the middle. A little bit too finicky, like the Joy-Cons just don't feel accurate enough for it, and that's just irritating when the technology just isn't finely tuned enough. So it would make sense that this would sell less. There are a lot of differences. Plus, it's another remake of Generation 1. We've all seen this before many times, and so there are likely a large group of people that are tired of that. But regardless of all of that, you can just see from these sales figures how easy it really is for them to just kind of coast along and take it easy, because their games are going to sell no matter what. It has the Pokemon name behind it. We'll see if all this drama actually impacts anything to a significant degree. I would be absolutely shocked if this actually puts any sort of a dent in how much these games are going to sell. Especially because of how much these games are going to sell to families who have no idea what's going on. They just see the name Pokemon, like parents who just see the name Pokemon and are like, this would make a great Christmas gift, this is perfect, I'm going to buy it. Like, that's a huge amount of sales just from that right there. So, I don't know. That's all that I can think about is like, personally, I don't have a bet in this fight. I don't care about it. As long as the game is good, I don't care which Pokemon are included. I can understand why other people are pissed off, especially because the entire point of Pokemon, I mean, the goddamn catchphrase is gotta catch them all. And so that's why now everybody's making fun of it by saying gotta catch some of them. I understand that aspect of it, but to me it doesn't matter. If it's a good game and the new Pokemon are actually interesting, I'm down with it. But it's absolutely undeniable, I think, that these games should be better. That they should have more investment in them. They should have a developer behind it who clearly wants to push these to be some of the best games ever made. which I think you just can't really argue. I think you can certainly argue that the Pokemon formula is one of the best that's ever been invented, and the original game certainly set the bar for what games could be in the future. But most of the games that have come after that, since even Gen 2, the leap from Gen 1 to Gen 2 was huge. The other leap, was it Gen 3 or Gen 4? I think it was Gen 4 that they actually split up all the attacks so that it wasn't just per type. Like each type of attack, each type in the game was either special or physical. There was no splitting of the type itself. So if you had a fire type attack, it was based off your special attack, no matter what attack it was. And then if you had a rock move, it was always physical. There was no divide. But then they split it eventually where certain attacks in the fire type were still special, but some of them were based off your normal attack. And that honestly revolutionized the viability of certain Pokemon. That was a huge step for them. It seems so simple, but it was a huge step for the game and its balance and the viability of certain Pokemon. They haven't made any of those big steps really recently. It just seems like every single game is kind of based around a gimmick that we don't even see anymore, right? Like, we had Mega Evolution for a while. That's been in a few versions of the game. It even found its way into Let's Go. But then that's gone now. We have that. I don't even know. I keep wanting to, whenever I think, oh, Dynamax, there we go. We have whatever the hell that is. Doesn't even do anything special. It's just you see a giant version of a Pokemon, which we've technically already kind of sort of seen in Pokemon Sun and Moon. Because whenever you fight the trial Pokemon there, they're always huge versions of the Pokemon themselves, and you can even obtain them in the game. I can't remember how, but you can. And so it's like, this is neither new nor revolutionary, and really I feel like the success of the game, I shouldn't say the success of the game, my opinion of the game is going to come down to how effective these small open-ish world patches of the game are. Do they just call them exploration ranges or something like that? Whatever they called them. I really feel like it's how cool they can make those that's going to determine my opinion of the game. Because we all know the gameplay formula works. And everybody already knows how they feel about the gameplay formula. The design of the Pokemon is obviously important itself. So that's another thing it's gonna be judged by. But in terms of actually pushing the game forward, that could be a small step toward actually seeing a fully realized open world game where they're starting small and seeing how it works out, seeing what they can do with it, and if it's successful, if they feel like it works, then they can expand that in a bigger way. But again, it feels so wrong that we're taking baby steps toward kind of what most of us want to actually see with a company with the resources of Nintendo and Game Freak and the Pokemon Company. It's just ridiculous. It's one of the highest grossing. I actually think I read recently that it's the highest grossing franchise of all time, bar none. There is nothing that has ever been created in this world that has made more money than Pokemon. The games don't reflect that. They really don't. They are not polished to a degree that you would think they would be based on the resources at their disposal. And so, I don't know. It really is just the thought of you get somebody who just has a vision of a story, who can actually tell a good story and can write good dialogue and can write good characters, and you put them in and you just set them free and let them rock, and you find somebody with the passion for this series, but also a good knowledge of mechanics, what's wrong, what works, what can be improved upon, what new things could be put into play that would make all these things that do work even better and potentially phase out all the things that don't. Again, somebody that's just passionate. That's all that you really need, is somebody that's passionate. And it doesn't feel like there's any of that behind Pokemon recently. It's just feels by the numbers. Alright, cool, we gotta release. It's time to release our Pokemon game this year. Here it is. It's what Assassin's Creed became for a long time. And Assassin's Creed, I don't think anybody can deny, absolutely sucked for a while. Then they took a huge break and they came back strong as hell. They didn't come back with the type of game that I personally like. I could not get into, it wasn't Odyssey. Odyssey was the Greek one. I never played that one. The one before that, Origins. I couldn't get into it. It just wasn't my jam. I didn't like the kind of RPG-esque gameplay of it, where it's like, are your numbers bigger than this guy's numbers? Yes, then you win. No, you get fucked up. Like, if it just kind of felt like the whole you can stealth and intelligently navigate your way through the world was kind of put on the back burner. Again, just for kind of a numbers game, essentially, which felt against why I liked Assassin's Creed to begin with. But still, I don't think anybody can deny that from a public viewpoint, from a sales viewpoint, Assassin's Creed came back hard after its break, and they've been killing it. They really have. Even if it's not personally my jam, it's undeniable that they've been killing it recently. And I really feel like Pokemon could use the same thing, where they just have people, whoever's working on this, step back for a minute, kind of understand that they're coasting, and they're not really doing anything with a franchise that should be at the forefront of gaming, and then evaluate what they have to do to actually make it achieve its potential. So that's my whole thoughts on the entire thing. I just figured I'd put it all out there because I like when there are topics that I can talk about that people are engaged in. Like, I hate talking about something and then nobody, like, there's just no comments on it. Nobody wants to have, like, to actually talk back about it. It's just a nothingness. I just put it out in the world and there's no response whatsoever. That sucks. But this got a response, so obviously I need to talk more about it. And, yeah, so thank you for listening if you made it this far. I mean, thank you for listening if you didn't, but you won't hear this part. Peace.